Well, here we are in the second day of October, and the weather across the country is, as it usually is in October, relatively calm and quiet. There's hardly any precipitation going on, some heat in the southwest, and the tropics are generally busy in places where we don't have to worry about them. So let's not worry about them together tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And you can support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast if you're an Amazon shopper by using our referral link to get there. You don't have to buy what's on the page it takes you to, but you could use the search bar and do your regular shopping. And Amazon will send us a little bit of coin for sending you to them, and it doesn't cost you a dime. And it's an easy and great way to support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. So, it's unusually quiet. I mean, the weather gets quiet from time to time during the course of the year, but this is one of those times. In October, being for many areas, it's the driest month of the year. Here in Georgia, it's the dry season. Although we had a really incredibly dry summer, if you X out Helene's rain and then a couple of other minor events in between. But it's not often that you see virtually the entire country devoid of precipitation.
Yeah, and we're going to continue in that pattern for a little while, it would appear. It looks like we may finally get some decent sunshine, which is something we haven't had too much of here in the Northeast. I should actually not say that because, again, a couple of days ago, we did have gloriously brilliant sunshine for a short while, at
You
least here
did
in
anyway.
the Hudson Valley. Yeah. Other places did not, but tomorrow, hopefully, we'll be able to share sunshine with everybody, as we also have an unseasonably mild couple of days coming up. So get on enjoy. It looks like though early next week we're going to have a real shot of cool, if not maybe downright chilly air, accompanied by some gusty winds. Joe.
Yes, and I was looking at the long range, and models seem to continue to be focusing on the idea that a rather impressive shot of colder air may be coming down for the middle of the month. And for those of you who are watching the tropics on a daily basis, I really don't think we'll have much to worry about as far as tropical storms and hurricanes anytime soon. Everything that's going on is going on way out in the eastern Atlantic and nowhere coming anywhere close to any land area. Uh, Bermuda, Azores, kind of smack it goes between the both of them, and the stuff in the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico is going to have a real tough time to develop because conditions are somewhat hostile in the upper atmosphere. Not everything turns into a Category 4 hurricane, and so it looks like it's going to stay on the quiet side. It's going to rain anywhere, Joe. It's probably going to be in Florida over the weekend and into early next week because they're going to be in that tropical flow with whatever goes on in the Gulf. But I'm not expecting. I don't think it's going to turn into much
Well,
as far as the tropical system is concerned.
yeah, it, as you just said, not you don't get Cat Force hurricanes all the time from the Gulf of Mexico, and even Mother Earth, if you will, needs to relax a little bit after what the hemorrhage that she gave up 4 or 5 days ago in Helene. So we'll be enjoying this quiet spell of weather for a while, and yeah, like I said, hopefully we'll be able to share some sunshine, lots of sunshine during the course of the day tomorrow.
Nice and sunny here today, which was great. Beautiful from pretty much from start to finish. And now we're going to have a nice, reasonably comfortable and cool night too here in the mountains of North Georgia. Welcome to everybody on the chat board tonight. Welcome to those of you watching in the background on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. To Thursday, tomorrow's Thursday. We are not going to do a show tomorrow. We're going to take the day off because the weather is so quiet. We probably could just take this show and just run it and repeat. That's how quiet it is and how similar it is across the nation. Subscribe to my YouTube channel and turn your notifications on so you don't miss us. Our normal schedule is Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Podcasts, Spotify, and a few other podcast platforms. Just search the Joe and Joe Weather Show, and we will come up. And if you like the show, hit the like button because who doesn't like to be liked? So I could name a few people, but that, that's a conversation for another day. Anyway, watches and warnings. Nothing in the east of consequence. Still a few leftover coastal flood warnings in southern Delaware, in and around Chesapeake Bay into southeast Virginia, and that's it. We have excessive heat warnings in counties in western Arizona and parts of southern and coastal California, with heat advisories running up the coast to north of San Francisco. And there's a cold front to the north of them, which is bringing some cooler air. We even have frost advisories up for eastern Washington, high wind watches up for western Montana, uh, freeze watches up for the western Dakotas, with a few frost advisories to the east into Minnesota, and a lot of red flag warnings for dry conditions and fire risk from Montana to northeast Colorado to northwest Nebraska, South Dakota to southern Minnesota, and northwestern Iowa. And this is a satellite loop, Joe, you don't see too often in terms of when you look at it. Uh, there, except for this dying cold front that is moving through upstate New York, eastern Canada, down into uh, Pennsylvania and West Virginia, Western Virginia. Uh, Other than that, I mean, there's hardly any cloud cover anywhere. A little bit up in the over Lake Superior, a little bit up in the Pacific Northwest. Hardly any cloud cover anywhere.
Except right here in the north. And I want to say one thing about tomorrow. Yes, we are calling for, at least I'm calling for sunshine, but it's going to be gradual increasing sunshine. You may wake up tomorrow morning, look out the window, you may actually say, hey, what's Rayo talking about? There's still a lot of clouds out there. Well, yeah, that front is going to be slowly moving through and actually dissipating or breaking down. Slowly but surely, though, we should see a gradual increase in the sun, a gradual decrease in the clouds. So with each passing hour, tomorrow should get better and better and better sky-wise. And then we, believe it or not, Joe, it looks to me like we're going to be going back to more clouds and sun on Friday. We have another disturbance that'll be moving through. I don't know what it is, but all of a sudden here in the Northeast, it's been tough to just get any decent amount of sun. We will eventually get into that sunshine in full, like so many other places to our west, but there seems to be a few places, a few tripping stones, if you will, that we must go through still between now and let's say the end of the week and the start of the weekend.
There's some disturbed weather in the Gulf of Mexico. You can clearly see it there. There's a little bit of disturbed weather in the Northwest Caribbean, but it's highly disorganized. Pressures are high up across the United States. You usually have lower than normal pressures down in the Gulf of Mexico and in the Northwest Caribbean, and that's going to be the case right through the weekend and into early next week. That doesn't necessarily mean something is going to come of that because of upper air conditions, not upper air conditioners. And look at this radar. I mean, I really have to struggle to find anything. There's some stuff aloft. I don't know what this is because if we look at the satellite, it's perfectly clear in Arkansas, Western Tennessee, and into Mississippi. And then you look at the radar, and
Is it
this
ground clutter maybe, or
it must be. I mean, there's nothing. There's no cloud cover at all. Maybe there's flocks of birds or something, uh,
that might be
but
it?
migrating southward. Actually, if you look at the way that uh, the analogous propagation, if that's what you want to call it, it's actually moving from north to south. So maybe it's migrating birds.
It might very well be. This is the time of the year, and you know what we call that, Joe? Poultry in motion.
But yes, exactly. They are some of them have arrived at what is that? At I-20? Yeah, looks like some of them have arrived at I-20 in Mississippi and also Route 22 in Mississippi as well. So they're doing their thing as they Interstate 22, I should say, as it they're doing their thing over there. A couple of very, very light sprinkles in Virginia. This is the tail end of that cold front, which really hardly produced anything today. There's a few specks in upstate New York and northeastern Pennsylvania. There's some showers. If you're really desperate to look for some rain, you got to go into Lake Superior with a boat. I don't know if people want to necessarily do that, but that's where that one patch of rain is going into Canada, and then it's just a snooze fest. And here's the surface map tonight. Here's this weather front that we're talking about. It's plotted to runs all the way up into some kind of deep low. There's a 972 low in Western Hudson Bay. Okay, and temperatures. I'm just looking on the Canada side there, way up in Canada, are in the 20s and 30s. So if you want cold weather, you can go up there. But that front is analyzed from there and it swings all the way down, running through Pennsylvania. It's very weak. I mean, this is one of the saddest excuses for a weather front, but it's there. And it becomes stationary across Georgia into Alabama and Mississippi. It kind of dies out in southeast Louisiana. In the Northwest, we've got a second front. Now, there's going to be another front coming through Friday night that's going to weaken too, and this is it into Minnesota, uh, into South Dakota, then swings northward back up through Montana. Another front analyzed from southwest Montana down into southwest Idaho and along the borders of Oregon, Nevada, and California. So it's actually fairly, it's in the 50s and 60s up in the Pacific Northwest, and it's in the 90s and hundreds in much of California, especially the coastal areas, Joe, are really seeing some very hot early fall weather. Don't they normally do get into the Santa Ana winds during the September October time frame?
Yeah, I always thought this was the time of the year to get that.
Yeah, well, it's certainly set up for it in terms of what the surface looks like.
I would agree. I would agree. This is the time. In fact, in some years, it gets so hot even in San Francisco, they start complaining about the heat, and that's a place that doesn't really have too many places that have air conditioning because there really isn't any need for it. Especially,
Right.
you go there in July and August, you figure, oh, it's the middle of summertime, and you go there, and we've talked about this. Winds sometimes off of the bay area. At night, it could be like in the 50s.
Oh
Worse.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you're west of the city near the coast, and all of the areas there and along the Pacific coast because the ocean is so darn cold. Yeah, you don't need AC there for accepted conditions where you've got that east wind and then you have a problem for a few days. The Storm Prediction Center, they've got their feet up and deservedly so. No severe weather in the forecast, not just today, but for the next 3 days, and nothing in the long range. Just for laughs, I'm going to say, do they have predictability too low for day 4, 5, potential too low for 6, 7, and 8? Excuse me. So they can relax and take a look at the 7-day rainfall forecast map. I mean, or the precip forecast map. Florida, yeah, several inches. In fact, some of those orange areas that you see along the west coast of Florida, we're talking 5 to 7 inches of rain over the next 7 days. And the WPC folks have uh, shaded out a very big area of heavy precip out in the eastern and central Gulf of Mexico, on the order of at least 7 to 10, and even a few pockets of 10 to 15. And some of that rain straddles the immediate Gulf Coast from the Texas coastal bend to the Florida Panhandle, where they're showing half an inch to an inch and a quarter in some places, but it sharply cuts off to the north of there. And in the Northeast, we're looking at a tenth to a quarter of an inch from New York City, Long Island, and the southern New England northward, a quarter to a half when you go up into upstate New York and central New England, and a half to three quarters in Maine. Also, the other spot to look at is coastal Washington and northwest Oregon, where some moisture that comes in from the Pacific. Big rains further north up into Vancouver and British Columbia, where some places up there get like 200 inches of rain a year. So the rest of the country, there's a lot of states here, Joe, that won't see a drop of rain for the next 7 days, and that thankfully includes uh, parts of South and North Carolina. I mean, very little in Western North Carolina. They certainly don't need any additional rain after what happened with Helene, and they can proceed with the cleanup if the weather could continue to cooperate. So, anyhow, not much happening here. I'm just looking at this GFS. High pressure. You look at the map for tomorrow afternoon, and I mean, there's nothing in terms of precip. Almost from coast to coast, there's just absolutely nothing here. Certainly tomorrow morning, and even into tomorrow evening. It looks like they got a few specks of rain in North Georgia and Western North Carolina from probably some little trough there. And then another front comes in. I think the Friday front is going to be something like this one. It produces some rain up in Vermont and New Hampshire, and that's it.
Well, I tell you, the total amount of rainfall that we're going to see here in the Northeast, or at least in the immediate tri-state area, doesn't look like very much at all. As you mentioned that, Joe, the one real shot or one real chance, I think, of getting some, if you want to call it significant shower activity, will be on Monday. We'll actually have not one but two fronts moving through. The first front early in the day on Monday likely to spawn at least a couple of showers. There's another one coming in later in the day that may not spawn much of anything except for some clouds. And then behind that second front, we're going to see a gradual increase in the wind. And Tuesday looks to be a real fall-like day, sunny to partly cloudy, or clouds mixing with sun, a brisk northwesterly breeze, and probably temperatures that are going to be down somewhere in the 60s, mid 60s, maybe even only the low 60s. And this weekend, if you're planning anything out of doors, I would say the better of the two weekend days is going to be Sunday. If for nothing else, Sunday will be the sunnier of the 2 days. Saturday may start out with a few clouds and gradually see more in the way of sunshine for the midday and the afternoon. We call it sunny to partly cloudy on Saturday afternoon, but then Sunday from start to finish looks bright and sunny. Don't you love it when you have this? I remember a long time ago, this goes back into the 80s, whenever I would read the technical discussions from the various weather offices, there was a guy in Pittsburgh. And whenever we had a pattern where we'd have fair weather, high pressure, tranquil weather, he'd always lead off his discussion with easy money weather. In other words, I'm just going to do a quickie discussion here, and I'm going to take off my shoes and put them on the desk and relax and read the Pittsburgh Chronicle and have a cup of coffee. That's more or less, I guess, what a guy working for maybe Bill Goodman can, next time he's on, he can describe what in his terms easy money weather is. But that seems to be the pattern that we're headed for in the coming days ahead.
The if you would, by the way, you can while I'm blabbing, um, if maybe you could go look at the Climate Prediction Center, as Miss Fowlerite would like to know about what they're doing in their long range. Maybe you could espouse on that if you
I will
would,
do that right now. If you want to
and
maybe share capabilities,
which I did. Load it up. I just want to finish. Let me just finish this with the GFS here. I did notice, by the way, that for Wednesday morning, Joe, that the magical 540 thickness on the GFS gets to Long Island and New York City and northern New Jersey, northeastern Pennsylvania. For those of you who are not too familiar, that 540 thickness is when we look at that blue line, that little blue dashed line that you see there that arcs down from eastern Canada across New York City. In a storm, that's where we usually look to see where the rain snow line is.
but we don't anticipate any rain, any snow in the coming
No,
days. Yeah.
but it reinforces the idea that the resulting deepening low in eastern Canada and in Atlantic Canada is going to bring down a shot of chilly air. This would be for uh, Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, and even hanging on into Thursday before it moderates. And after that, there's a more impressive one that the models seem to be keying on for the middle part of the month, and you can see it here in a little comma shape that's up in near Lake Winnipeg, moving eastward with a strong cold front, and that brings down a very, for this time of year, a pretty chilly air mass into everybody east of the Mississippi and down into the deep south. So that's something to look forward to. But going out for the next 16 days, there's an absolute absence of any kind of storm systems elsewhere. There's no nor'easters. And then if you look down in the Gulf of Mexico, you can see that the models continue they have a lot of moisture down there, and it gets into Florida. And it does develop a little low in the eastern Gulf, but gradually that whole area winds up sinking southward because of building pressures in the middle and South Atlantic states. So again, I don't think there's going to be much of any tropical storm threat to worry about with regards to what's down in the Gulf, at least from what I'm seeing right now. And Joe has the 6 to 10 day outlook.
Yes, and here it is, the temperature outlook from the folks at the Climate Prediction Center. And you can see on this map that I would say about two-thirds of the country will be enjoying above normal temperatures from the period from the 8th through the 12th of October. In fact, this area that I'm pointing out right here, and let me just zoom in on it. Well, actually, that's too much of a zoom, so I'm going to go back.
Yeah, just a smidge.
Yeah, just a smidge here. This area right here in the very dark red, 80 to 80 to 90% probability of above normal temperatures. So it's really going to be warm across the plain states and into the northern and central Rockies. Anywhere in here, you'll be finding temperatures probably well above normal. Meantime, here in the east, check this out. Here in the eastern part of the country, and especially here in the northeast, we're going to be in a area where it's going to be, I'd say 50 to 60% probability of below normal temperatures, and we're not just leaning below, according to the legend from the CPC Climate Prediction Center. This is likely to be below normal. So, as Joe alluded to earlier, we're looking for some rather coolish temperatures here for the middle part of next week, the 8th through the 12th. That takes us from next Tuesday until a week from this Saturday. Cool temperatures. Now, you may say, okay, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that we're going to be enjoying bright sunny skies, or is it cool because it's going to be cloudy and wet? So let's check out what the precipitation outlook is going to be. And wow, I tell you, I'd say about 70% of the country is going to be enjoying below normal precipitation, including here in the Northeast. So it looks like it's going to be dry. It's going to be coolish here in the east or the Northeast. The only place with above normal, significant above normal conditions is down in the so-called Sunshine State, where Florida, much of the Florida Peninsula, should be seeing wet conditions, probably showery conditions, and also above normal precipitation-wise across the West Coast. In fact, it goes all the way from the Washington, Oregon coastline down into the northern and central areas of California. Everywhere else, it's either going to be below normal or near normal in terms of precipitation. That's the 6 to 10 day. Let's just take a quickie look at the 8 to 14 day outlook. You can see that going all the way out to the middle of the month, October 16th, still above normal across much of the western and central portions of the country, below normal across much of the east. And in terms of precipitation, well, check this out. We are looking at, again, many places below normal or near normal. The only place that still remains above normal precipitation-wise, well, this time it moves into the Four Corners area of the country, Utah and Colorado, northern New Mexico, northern and central Arizona, and a part of southern Nevada, they'll be above normal. And also, still above normal will be much of the Florida Peninsula, except maybe the uh, northern part of Florida and the Panhandle area. And believe me, I certainly could use a break there in terms of precipitation. But it looks like, Joe, an extended stretch, at least in the Northeast and the tri-state area, an extended stretch of cooler than normal and drier than normal conditions, taking us all the way into the middle part of the month.
By the way, I just was looking at the ensemble upper air. One of the things that strikes me is that there is blocking that's developing up in Greenland, and that's happening over the next couple of days. It just kind of stays there through the weekend and into next week. And two things are happening. It's sort of forcing troughing to come down into the eastern part of the United States and offshore. It's also dropping a rather vigorous cutoff through the Aleutians and into the Gulf of Alaska. So that puts the ridge in the southwest and pushes it up into the plains. So that whole area winds up staying dry. But what really struck me is when I went out, going out to 300 hours. Uh, and normally you don't see this. Once you start getting past like day 10 or so, you start to see these anomalies, the blue and the red and so on, kind of shrink a bit and go away. But out at 300 hours, and that would take us to that period I mentioned earlier about the middle part of the month, around the 14th and 15th. There's a fairly impressive looking troughing here that you see in the eastern part of the United States and out over Atlantic Canada, with ridging mostly, over in the plains and up the Rockies and into west central Canada. Uh, that's a pretty good indication that the ensembles are on board with this idea that there'll be a more, an impressive cool shot coming down for the middle part of the month, as well as the one for early next week. The one in the middle of the month will be more impressive than the one for early next week. So, very interesting that the models have kind of leaned in that particular direction. That was the 12Z ensembles. The 18Z ensembles were actually a little bit more impressive with that troughing in the east around the middle part of the month. And you can sort of see it here. The ridge is actually a little bit further west uh, on uh, on this particular run. So something to think about in the longer term. Maybe the second half of the month is going to be uh, cooler than the first half, but we'll see how it plays. Lou Aricio, thank you for hitting super chat tonight. Most appreciated. We'll be looking at the long range stuff more and more, obviously, as we get deeper into October, when we start to get to that point where, for the winter weather folks, that things get a little active and a bit more interesting, not just in the Northeast, but of course, anywhere in the country where we start to see winter weather popping up. We will, of course, be on top of it. Meanwhile, in the tropics, Kirk, Joe, Kirk has an eye already. So it's strengthening rather quickly here and taking the look of a major hurricane as it sits out in the way out in the Atlantic. I mean, it's sort of halfway between the northern Leeward Islands and the northernmost Cabo Verde Islands. So, this ain't coming here. And you can see the general tendency of the motion is more to the northwest. To the southwest of that, we have Tropical Depression 13, which is actually getting some northerly shear from the outflow. If you look at the outflow clouds from Kirk that come over the top and then drop southward, so there's northerly shear going on over Leslie, or what will be Tropical Storm Leslie, because the Hurricane Center is saying that that's going to strengthen into a hurricane, although it may be limited as to how strong it gets because um, of Kirk being so close. Let's see, just on the latest advisory here, Kirk was at 18.9 and 44 west, way out there. 90 mile an hour winds, moving northwest at 12. Tropical Depression 13, and I'll show you before we show that. This is what here's the forecast from the Hurricane Center. They have it as a major hurricane by tomorrow morning. It may already be there, and then turning northward, and then gradually turning northeastward between Bermuda and the Azores, and then on its way out. And may eventually wind up being a big storm going into Europe sometime later next week. And as we look at the one behind it, which will be Leslie, they have this moving pretty slowly, but becoming a tropical storm overnight, and then a hurricane by the time we get to Friday. And also, this one is turning northwestward, and barely gets to 45 degrees west, and it's already has more of a northerly component of motion, not coming to the eastern seaboard, and we still have the disturbed weather that's in the Western Gulf. They have now lowered the chances down to 30%. They've been staying at, they went up to as high as 50. Now then they dropped it back to 40, and now they have it at a 30% chance that this could become a tropical depression over the next 7 days. So
And
again,
you mentioned that storm that may affect Europe about a minute or two ago. If I recalled, Europe has their own list of names, right, for
for the
major.
extratropical storms, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Post tropical systems or extratropical storms. Actually, we can. Let me take a look. Let's take a look at what the GFS is doing over Europe, and let me get the right map up here. So let's see what they got, and then I'll put it back up on the screen for all our European viewers here,
And
because
we do have people who watch
we
us from
do, we do have some. We have people that watch us from all corners of the earth, Joe. Um,
It's amazing.
so let me roll this back. Let's see what we got. Uh, well, it's snowing in
What
the
do you think if
Alps.
we were back in the days at City College? What would you have thought if somebody came up to you and said, "Well, in about 40 years, you guys are going to be on broadcasts that are going to be seen all over the world"? That, that would have blown our minds, I think.
Yeah, I always had it in my mind sometimes to think it wouldn't it be great if we could do something. I mean, I didn't have the vision, certainly don't have didn't have the vision to see it like this. Um, but we've come a long way in 40 years. And
It
by the
is.
way, here it is on the GFS. It's a 9:47 low next early Wednesday morning, 6Z Wednesday, moving northeast, east and northeast, and it goes into I guess that's the Irish Sea between Ireland and Great Britain. Uh, as a wrapped up 960-ish low, pretty deep cyclone that is headed up for the British Isles.
Well, it'll be one that they, I'm sure, will be. I mean, what did you say the millibar was 947?
947 at the point here where it's at. Hold on, let me get back to let me roll it back. So early Wednesday morning at 6Z, when the center is at 45 north and about 22 west. It's a 947 on the GFS.
Jeez.
And then it goes right up between the model takes it right up into the Irish Sea. I mean, they're going to blow away with this if this winds up verifying along with some heavy rains, depending on just exactly what they're dealing with. I mean, just looking at this, it looks like an energized post-tropical cyclone at this point. But I don't. Who knows what what the Hurricane Center is going to do with it? And I want to just take a look at the European to see if that does the same thing. The European has it a little slower and a little further south, takes it over northwestern France, Joe. Over northwestern France, it's a 977 low. It's not quite as deep as the GFS when it's out. And there's two centers. There's one at 48 and 19, and then there's another center at 43 and 21. So both have something going in that general direction. So I think that might be something that we'll be talking about here when we come back next Sunday. Oh, and if you could, because my friend Kate emailed me and asked me if to ask you about the solar flares.
Well, there was a major solar flare yesterday. It occurred at about 6 o'clock in the evening yesterday. What made it eye-opening is that it was categorized as an X7. Now, this would be the second biggest or the second most potent flare in the current sunspot cycle. And an X7 is nothing to sneeze at. In fact, it does have the potential, and the uh, folks at the Space Weather Prediction Center in Colorado have indicated, Joe, that we may have a chance tomorrow night of a severe geomagnetic storm as a result of that major flare yesterday. So, with the outlook calling for a clearing of our skies and possibly, well, I would say clear at least into the first part of tomorrow night in the tri-state metropolitan area. Wherever it happens to be clear where you may be tomorrow night, you might want to periodically check the sky, especially toward the north, and see if there's any sign of an aurora borealis, the northern lights display. We had one in May. This one coming up tomorrow night might give us a significant show of aurora. Sometimes it's very difficult. These folks who forecast space weather, sometimes the stream of particles spewing out from a solar flare on the sun uh, isn't as necessarily directed straight at us. Sometimes it may miss the Earth by only a little bit, but in any case, it's something that worth looking for. And next week, Joe, late next week, everybody should look toward the western part of the sky because we have a comet that was discovered in China and also in South Africa. The Chinese, their observatory is the Purple Mountain Observatory, but the Chinese way of saying that is Tushishan. Tushishan, and the robotic camera that caught the comet as well in South Africa. The acronym is ATLAS, Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System. This is a system. They have two telescopes in Hawaii, one in South Africa, one in Chile. They're constantly looking at the skies 24/7, watching, seeing whether or not there might be an asteroid that might be in our general vicinity that might possibly, collide with the Earth or come very, very close. So they're constantly watching the skies, but they're also picking up on other things. And so this system, this series of telescopes, this robotic cameras, picked up on the same comet that the people in China, the Tushishan Observatory, picked up. So the comet is known as Tushishan Atlas. It has been putting on a great show in the morning sky just before sunrise. You can see it a bright little head and a tail coming up before sunup. But next week, beginning after, let's see, October the 9th is on Wednesday. So beginning, I would say, a week from Friday and then running for 2 weeks thereafter. If you look into the western sky, if you've never seen a comet before, it looks like you're going to have a good chance of seeing one, a very bright head and a fairly substantial tail. That will be visible in our skies, in our evening skies, right after sunset, beginning late next week. Something for people to look for, something that, this will probably be the most observed or witnessed comet going back to 1997 when we had the Hale-Bopp comet. So this is going to be a very significant comet. Comets don't often become bright enough for you to see with the unaided eye, but this one has already done that, and it will shift from the morning into the evening later next week. In fact, Joe, this comet, some are thinking this comet may become so bright that on Wednesday it might even be glimpsed in the daytime, but it will also be just a couple of degrees within the distance of the sun. So if you wanted to try to see it in the daytime, you'd have to hold your hand up to block the sun out, or your thumb to block the sun out to see if you could see a bright speck of light, which would be the comet passing just above the sun. That's kind of dangerous. I mean, you don't want to look directly at the sun, even for a short time. You could injure your eyes. I would just simply say, sit, wait, allow the comet to move away from the sun later next week when it moves into the evening sky, and you should have a great show. So, two things to watch for: a comet beginning late next week, and again tomorrow night. If nature's in a show off mood and that big flare on the sun yesterday does its job, we may have a chance of seeing a display of the aurora borealis, the northern lights. So, two things to watch in our sky. And with the weather so calm and clear and tranquil, we couldn't have picked a better time to have that kind of weather moving in if you want to see something celestial in our night skies in the coming days ahead.
All right. So we do a little Briller Jeopardy before we wrap it up?
I do believe I have Briller Jeopardy.
You do. You indeed do. Yes.
Yes, and I will go and get it because I know Mr. Briller sent it. As soon as we shut down the show last night, I heard my little phone ring and ding, and I said, "Oh, it must be the chairman." And here it is on this Briller Jeopardy: annual snowfalls for these 5 cities. So we're going to find out if any of you know what the average or annual snow rates or snowfalls are for 5 cities. We will start. Let me just see if I can get a clearer picture of this here. Let's start with Dallas. Annual snowfall in Dallas, Texas, Joe.
I'll say 3 inches.
That's close. In fact, that's
These are
insane.
round numbers, right? Let's work
Yes,
with just round numbers.
yes.
Jason Fox said 4 inches and Maggie P said two.
Maggie
Uh,
P is correct, and so is Frank Scalera. Two
okay,
inches.
and Patrick Darcy and Northern Grace and on and on and on. Okay, next.
Denver, Denver, Colorado.
Oh, well,
You know, Denver can get snow in September.
I'm
You know,
gonna.
Denver in the month of May can get 80 degrees, and the next day gets 6 inches of snow. That's Denver.
I'm trying to decide if I should say 49 or 60. All right, I'll go 60.
You should have gone with 49.
49. I knew it. Was that the exact number?
That was the exact number.
Okay, I take it back. 49.
All right. So how about Detroit, the Motor City?
I'll say for
Tyler
them.
Fenga, this is for the entire year. It's I guess you could say it's for the entire year. It's for the entire snow season.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll say for Detroit. I'll say like 39.
A little too low, Joe.
Little too low. Okay, Patrick Darcy said 43, uh,
Closer.
and Lou Mauricio said 40.
But
Um,
Gerasimos Strasinos, 45, right on the nose.
45. Okay.
I'm gonna ring the bell, not so much for his name, but for the fact I'm just trying to closely as I can best pronounce the name. There you go. 45 Gerasimos. How about Hartford? Hartford, Connecticut.
Hartford.
Hartford.
I'll say 45 for them.
Another too low.
Too low. Okay.
Too low.
Um, Tyler Fiegas is 52.
Tyler Fenger, we're going to give you a bell ring right on the
Patrick
nose.
Darcy also said 52.
And Patrick Darcy, we already rang the bell, but thank you. You were right
Okay.
too. How about KC, Kansas City?
I'll say 24.
Wow, it's a little too high, believe it or
A little
not.
too high. Okay. Okay. Um, I'm waiting to see some. Jason Fox is 20. Uh, Gerasimos Stasinos says 22.
We actually
Uh,
have two on the chat board that hit it right on the nose. Tyler
uh,
Finger again,
at
and Maggie
18.
P, 18, and Chuck
18. Chuck
Cardillo with
Cardillo
18.
said 18.
Yes,
And Patrick Darcy said 18.
and Patrick Darcy said 18. Now the bonus, and believe it or not, this is actually a town as well as an island, Nantucket.
Nantucket. Um, hmm. I'll go for an even dozen.
Whoa, that's way down there, Joe.
Way
Remember
too
that
low.
Nantucket,
Well, I know because that's tough because when the big ones come, they get hammered, so that
right,
skews the numbers up. I know the Long Island numbers are high. I probably should have, but Nantucket sticks out a little bit further, so they change to rain a lot.
right.
Okay, well, Patrick Darcy said 25. Chuck
That's
Cardillo
close.
said 26.
Norm Roberts says 22, and Norm, you're in snake country with that 22.
Okay, just trying to see if anybody else got anything close to 22. No, Tyler Fanga with 21. Mike Waterhouse at 21, but Christina Petey has got 23. So which one is it?
That's 23 for Christinapedia.
Okay, very good. Pretty soon we'll be dealing with those kind of numbers. Who knows? We'll see. But in the meantime, it's still early October and the weather is quiet. So again, no show tomorrow night, and we'll be back Sunday night at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time. Say good night, Joe.
Good night, Joe.
Good night, everybody.